Good morning, everyone. Good morning. That's great. Everybody's very vibrant here this morning. I see Judge Rainey got his red tie on. Well, I'd ask that you join me again in the Pledge of Allegiance and before we begin our 9th meeting for calendar year 2013. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first matter on this morning's agenda is the approval of the minutes from the April 18th public meeting. And I believe Vice Chairman Coleman, you are the editor of the minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I reviewed the minutes of the April 18th, 2013 public meeting, and I move that they be approved as submitted.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as submitted. It's a pleasure to welcome to the podium to begin public meeting here this morning Ms. Cheryl Walker-Davis. Cheryl, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning.
May it please this Honorable Commission, on behalf of your various offices and bureaus, we present for your consideration and disposition the following agenda items. Commencing this morning with matters on behalf of the Bureau of Audits, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the staff recommendation appearing on page 1 to release the audit report of Aqua Pennsylvania, Inc.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On behalf of the Director of Regulatory Operations on page 2, there are 2 items. It is recommended that the Commission adopt the first item with regard to the investigation of Pennsylvania's retail electricity market, customer education mailing, and it is recommended that the Commission adopt the final order there appearing.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Also, on behalf of the Director of Regulatory Operations, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the proposed tentative order inviting parties to comment on the consistent terminology in customer communications, particularly with regard to the fixed price pass-through clause.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On behalf of the Office of Special Assistance, it is recommended that the Commission adopt all items commencing on page 3 of the public meeting agenda and continuing with all items on pages 4, 5, and 6 through and including the recommendation pertaining to Best Rate Limousine, LLC.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
On behalf of the Bureau of Technical Utility Services, commencing on page 7, it is recommended that the Commission adopt all items appearing on pages 7, 8, 9, and the first 2 items through and including the recommendation pertaining to Aaron's Transportation Services, LLC on page 10.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, with regard to the next 2 items, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the staff recommendations with regard to People's TWP LLC at the bottom of page 10 and People's Natural Gas Company LLC at the top of page 11. Those recommendations pertaining to petitions pertaining to tariff waivers for customer service line replacement, the approval of long-term infrastructure improvement plans, as well as the approval of distribution system improvement charges, noting the statement of Commissioner Cawley with regard to both items.
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Cawley for purposes of his combined statement. Commissioner Cawley.
Thank you, Chairman. I ask that it be included in the record as if I had read all of it. It is clear that People's and People's TWP are accelerating infrastructure investment overall, even though they're not going to be installing as many meters or at the pace that they previously have. So it is appropriate to approve the long-term infrastructure improvement plans. However, it is not clear from our previous implementation orders whether all utility investments for listed equipment used to replace existing infrastructure pursuant to Act 11 of 2012 are subject to distribution system improvement charge recovery if the overall infrastructure investment objectives are met and maintenance is maintained, regardless of whether the replacement of certain aspects of the infrastructure is not accelerated, as the meters won't be. It is encouraging that Peoples and Peoples TW Phillips are significantly accelerating infrastructure investment in mains and service lines, if not in meters. However, interested parties, I believe, should address this issue more directly in future proceedings. In this proceeding, the issue appears to have been decided by default without adequate discussion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawley. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Gardner.
I'd like to be associated with Commissioner Cawley's statement.
So noted. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, noting the combined statement of Commissioner Cawley and noting that Commissioner Gardner is associating himself with Commissioner Cawley's combined statement.
In omnibus fashion, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the remaining items on page 11, commencing with the recommendation pertaining to O1 Communications LLC and continuing to include all items appearing on pages 12, 13, except Prestige Transportation LLC, which has been withdrawn by the Bureau.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the staff report on page 14 with regard to the earnings report, making that earnings report public, the quarterly earnings report, noting your statement, Mr. Chairman, which is a joint statement with Commissioner Whitmer, as well as the statements of Commissioners Gardner and Cawley.
So moved.
Second?
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Gardner for purposes of his statement. Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like my dissenting statement to be entered into the record as if read in its entirety. Act 11 provides that the DIS return on equity shall be the equity return rate approved by the utility's most recent fully litigated rate case. However, for utilities that have not had a recent rate case, Act 11 provides that the return on equity shall be the equity return rate calculated by the Commission in the most recent quarterly earnings report. I wish to point out that the DIS return on equity established in this quarterly earnings report are quite inflated given the range of return on equities indicated by staff as being reasonable. The indicated range of return on equities for electric distribution companies based on recent market data is 7.31 to 9.45%, yet the DIS return recommended by the majority is 10.2%. The market indicated range for the gas distribution companies is 7.63 to 8.92%, yet the DIS return recommended by the majority is 10.1%. These DIS return on equity recommended by the majority today are not supported by the realities of the current financial market. Capital is readily available and reasonably inexpensive. These inflated DIS returns are not necessary to attract investment capital to Pennsylvania. Because the return on equities chosen by the majority are not market-based, I cannot say that consumers' interests have been considered. As such, I respectfully dissent.
Now I'd like to recognize Commissioner Cawley for purposes of his statement. Commissioner Cawley.
Thank you, Chairman. I ask that my two-page dissenting statement be included in the record as if I had read all of it. The great irony here is that this commission fought so long to extend the distribution system improvement charge, particularly to natural gas utilities, which we thought was particularly imperative. And now we're disagreeing about what return on equity should be included for those utilities that haven't had a base rate case yet to establish a basis before you set the return on equity. Commissioner Gardner and I happen to think that the majority is setting it a bit too high, based on the fact that this commission for decades has used admittedly imperfect methods of determining rate of return on equity. Specifically, the capital asset pricing model and a discounted cash flow model. Nobody in the world knows how to accurately predict what returns on equity are appropriate. So I don't think we should get terribly exercised about this. Commissioner Gardner and I would set it a little bit lower than the majority would. Going forward, I think this will settle into a more established pattern. But for the time being, I think I would set it a little lower at this point simply because I think the great benefit of a distribution system improvement charge is that the utility is able to recover its investment on a quicker basis, and therefore that incents the utility to make investments faster than it ordinarily would, because ordinarily when it makes improvements, it has to wait until a rate case in order to have the improvements included in the rate base and before a return is earned on the investment. With the DISC, it gets the investment back much faster by a surcharge on the bill. That's all very good, and I think we all are in agreement that is a wonderful improvement to rate making in Pennsylvania. In fact, it's been adopted in many states. And in fact, I just got back from a conference in which I was bombarded with questions by commissioners and staff from around the country who want more details about how we do this. So what we're voting on today is really a very minor part of it in the overall scheme. The important thing is this is an important rate-making tool, and where we set the rate of return on equity is important, but it's not as important as the fact that the legislature finally gave us this as a way of encouraging utilities to replace aging infrastructure. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawley. I'd like to have the joint statement of Commissioner Whitmer and I entered into the record, and I too will not read all the moving paragraphs in the statement, but I think Commissioner Cawley set it up nicely. We're simply having, respectfully here, an open and honest philosophical debate on return on equity. And let's face it, determining ROEs is always a challenge. It's complex and a particularly significant component of the rate-making process. And I think we appreciate the efforts on behalf of our TUS staff and the working group to update and improve the modeling process associated with the quarterly earnings report. I think it's important to mention here this morning, and it's important to recognize there is more to the ROE story than just setting a DCF calculation and providing a standard deviation from that calculation. In a typical rate case, parties present a range of discounted cash flow models and results based on varying assumptions of yield, growth, proxy group selection, and a time frame by a number of experts. In this instance, we only have one viewpoint on all those inputs. Plus, you got to consider all the factors that go into determining ROEs. And I think this morning it's unreasonable to suggest that in this day and age that one standard deviation range beyond a single DCF model is the only basis for setting ROE. Now, recently, the PUC approved an ROE allowance of 10.4% in the PPL Electric Utilities rate case, and a settlement in the Aqua, Pennsylvania rate case that set an ROE for their discalculation purposes at 10.2%. In these two cases, obviously these two cases are timely, they're clear, and they're objective. In the PPL case, we found that the 10.4% ROE fell within a reasonable range for the ROE using the DCF methodology. We explained that setting appropriate ROEs is especially critical considering the plans of our Pennsylvania utilities to accelerate replacement of aging infrastructure. I need not remind anybody in this room, if you take some of our gas distribution companies, some of our electric distribution companies, from a holding company perspective, decisions are made where incremental capital is going to be invested. And I'd like to think at the end of the day, two of us at this bench served with 20-plus years of service in the economic development arena, that the flow of that capital, because of a robust ROE incentive, would benefit the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and benefit the investment in our state, not only in job creation, I hate to be motherhood and apple pie here, but the contractors that are going to be doing this work, union and non-union. So I think that story doesn't get told here today, and what I think Commissioner Cawley said up here nicely. We don't want to openly debate this, but it's just a philosophical difference. And so I think at the end of the day, we take this regulatory consistency and we take these issues of getting rid of regulatory lag very seriously. We also strongly value the need for infrastructure replacement. That was made very loud and clear when we took up this debate on expanding the very successful, nationally recognized water distribution system improvement charge to now allowing it to be used for electric and gas. As I like to tell people, we are not approving the gold plating of our distribution systems. We're not paying for OPEB expenses. We're paying for investment in archaic, carbon-44 tested infrastructure that needs to be replaced in a timely manner so that the citizens of this Commonwealth have safe and reliable and affordable rates. And I think we've accomplished that in the very successful water DISC. And I think one theme that has come out of the DISC mechanism is this whole notion of gradualism with respect to changes in ROEs is also important, because when reviewing the end result, I think you got to strike that appropriate balance between incenting the utility to aggressively replace this aging, and then sometimes we learned in the case of UGI and PGW, when you have tragic events like Allentown and Philadelphia, now more than ever, the alarm bells are off in this state about getting rid of this cast iron bare steel pipe in a timely fashion. And I think today what we're trying to do here is strike an appropriate balance, and I think we've done that, and it's been a very healthy debate. I want to respect all of our staffs in the work product and the debate that took place on this issue. At the end of the day, I think we are in an appropriate spot in determining that it is now an important part that we set this ROE range. And I think, to Commissioner Cawley's credit here this morning, I think we'll all join together in working with the TUS staff and others to really see where we go with these quarterly earning reports. So I thank Commissioner Whitmer for joining me in this joint statement. I also respectfully thank my colleagues, Commissioner Gardner and Commissioner Cawley, for their dissenting statements. And is there any further discussion before we call the vote? The objections will be noted. Hearing none, the motion will pass 3-2, noting the dissenting statements of Commissioner Cawley and Commissioner Gardner. Thank you.
Continuing with the presentation of public meeting agenda items and the item on behalf of the Law Bureau, it is recommended on page 15 that the Commission adopt the Law Bureau's recommendation, which redefines, pursuant to Act 129, the application and application process for conservation service providers.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Turning now to matters on behalf of the Office of Administrative Law Judge, commencing on page 16, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommended decision of ALJs Watson and Hoyer with regard to the general rate increase proceeding involving the Columbia Gas of Pennsylvania, Inc., noting the statement of Commissioner Cawley.
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Cawley for purposes of his statement. Commissioner Cawley.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I asked my statement to be included in the record as if I had read all of it. My statement merely commends the parties for a job well done, particularly for the creation of a weather normalization adjustment and keeping customer charges, in fact, reducing them rather than increasing customer charges. Where a fixed amount on the bill discourages conservation, because if it's a fixed charge, you can't reduce your bill by economizing or reducing your usage. And I compliment the parties for their commitment to discuss other means of removing barriers to new service extensions. I like this settlement, and I like the way the parties went about it, and I just wanted to note it in writing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawley. Any discussion?
Chairman,
Commissioner Gardner.
once again, I'd like to be associated with Commissioner Cawley's statement.
So noted. I'd simply add, too, I'd commend Columbia Gas for the reduction, but simply remind them as we're having a debate on Senate Bill 738 that they do the proper analysis of the Senate bill in supporting gas expansion beyond what's currently outlined in this settlement. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, noting the statement of Commissioner Cawley.
It is recommended that the Commission adopt ALJ Dunderdale's recommended decision pertaining to the National Fuel Gas Distribution Company's tariff to unbundle natural gas procurement costs from distribution costs.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
With regard to ALJ Pell's recommended decision pertaining to the settlement in the Philadelphia Gas Works proceeding to unbundle natural gas procurement costs from distribution rates, as well as to recover those costs through a procurement charge and establish a merchant function charge, there is the motion of Commissioner Cawley.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Cawley for purposes of his motion.
Thank you, Chairman. This is identical to a motion that I made and we adopted at our last public meeting. In this proceeding, PGW proposed to unbundle natural gas procurement costs from distribution rates and to recover these costs through a gas procurement charge that would be included in its price to compare. The company also proposed to establish a merchant function charge, rider, to remove uncollectible bad debt expense from distribution rates and to recover these costs through a merchant function rider that would be included in the price to compare. And finally, the tariff requests a reformulation of the price to compare to include the newly created gas procurement charge and merchant function charge, and of necessity, a purchase gas cost E-factor. The only problem with this is that the company's gas procurement charge proposal included no provision for working capital, despite the fact that our regulations require including such costs in the gas procurement charge. PGW left it in base rates, and my motion would require that the company follow our regulations, get these costs out of the rate base, get them into base rates and into the gas procurement charge. And it gives the settling parties time, if they wish to continue with litigation rather than continuing with the settlement. My guess is that they will acquiesce in this, but in any event, this motion gives them an opportunity to continue to litigate if they wish to. But if no one takes exception and the company complies with the filing of a new tariff, then the settlement as modified by my motion would become effective by operation of law. Therefore, I move that the recommended decision be modified consistent with this motion and that the Office of Special Assistance draft in appropriate order.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, that concludes the presentation of regular agenda items. Turning now to the carrying agenda and matters on behalf of the Bureau of Technical Utility Services. It is recommended that the Commission adopt the first item on page 1 of the carrying agenda pertaining to MedEd, Penelec, and Penn Power's requests to amend their Phase 1 energy efficiency and conservation charge, amongst other matters.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
It is recommended that the Commission adopt the TUS recommendation with regard to the MedEd, Penelec, and Penn Power and West Penn petition to modify their second revised default service plan, noting the statement of Commissioner Gardner.
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to recognize Commissioner Gardner for purposes of his 15-page statement. Commissioner Gardner.
It's actually I edited down to 14 and a half. But fortunately for you, I'll only read half of that. I'd like my statement to be entered into the record as if I read it in its entirety. The first energy companies have proposed to recover the cost of their customer referral programs by charging each participating EGS $30 per referred customer and recovering any cost over $30 through a non-bypassable surcharge. The companies have indicated that because the cost of this program will be $38.58 per customer, $8.58 per customer will be covered through this the proposed non-bypassable surcharge. I highlight, however, that today we're also approving cost recovery for PPL Electric customer referral program. Because PPL has indicated that the cost per customer will be under $30, no surcharge is needed. I encourage the First Energy companies to review their cost per customer to determine if there's any way possible for them to get their cost per referred customer below $30. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Gardner. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, noting Commissioner Gardner's statement.
On page 2 of the carrying agenda at the top, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the staff recommendation with regard to PPL Electric Utilities Corporation Default Service Plan.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
And it is recommended that the Commission adopt the recommendation of the Bureau of Technical Utility Services to direct PennDOT to close a bridge to vehicular traffic involving a Canadian Pacific Railroad crossing.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, that does conclude the presentation of agenda items.
I believe there is no other items to come before the Commission here this morning. We are adjourned, but before we adjourn again, I want to wish you on behalf of my colleagues a very safe and enjoyable Memorial Day holiday. Thank you.